What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Football Chatbox. Unfortunately, we're repeating this again because this previous stream broke, but I'm joined with a very special guest, Anthony, FPL Dimmer on Twitter, so you can follow him over there. We're going to be talking about mini leagues, attacking versus defending. Let's get straight into it because I think some might have caught the previous video as well. You're having a really good season in the top 10K, and we're going to be here to talk about how to defend and also how to attack your mini league. Whether you're in the defending or chasing, we'll cover both sides, but we'll start mainly first with the defending part and we'll get straight into it. So this is the current team that you've sent, but it doesn't have McAllister at the moment.
So while it is achievable, it's probably unlikely. And I'm sitting 12 points inside the top 5K. At the start of the year, I had an aim to finish in the top 10K. I've got a 29-point buffer on that. So my aim now is to defend my current rank. I'd be ecstatic to finish where I am now at the very end of the season. So I'm sure we're going to be running through, I guess, my strategy versus, I guess, someone who's looking to chase. And then, working through, I guess, who are the players that we're looking to both actually target.
Yep, true. So this currently, let me bring it up for everyone on the chat as well, is the current top 10K most owned players, and it's very similar to the team that you sent me as well. I guess the midfield is almost similar. Defense, we kind of touched on it. Like, defense is slightly different, but you've got the main key players, I would say.
Yeah, so looking at the defense, I think most teams inside the top 20, 30,000 are going to have, or they're probably looking to get towards Trent Alexander-Arnold, Estupiñán and Shaw. Trippier, even though there is 95% owned, not sure how many teams he'll start in this week. I think for the first time in a while, he'll probably drop under 50% ownership for this week, just with all of the other options that, seem to be available, especially the 5 crucial spots in the middle. Those 5 there will likely be the 5 that I'll have this week. I currently don't have McAllister, but I think in order for me to defend my rank, I'm looking at a player like that, 68% owned. There are the other Manchester City assets that I could look at, but they might only be 10 to sort of 20% owned. And if McAllister went off, and there were the 2 weeks in a row when he scored very well, that could hurt my rank significantly. Looking at the strikers, I think most are going to have Haaland, as we know, and probably he should be around 200% ownership this week. The other 2 strikers from Newcastle, they've got such a high ownership, as we know, because of the existing double game week that we're in. So I'll probably be looking to start probably Isak this week. There was a little rumor overnight that Wilson wasn't spotted training. So that also leans, probably puts more in favour me to lean towards the go Alexander Isak.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think if you're someone who is defending, the best way right now to hold rank would be somewhat playing like quite safe. If you wanted to maybe have one differential that could maybe give you that edge over maybe trying to climb rank if possible as well. But even if you look at it, you've got the likes of Trippier, who has a single game week, and obviously Newcastle haven't kept really good impressive, like clean sheet record hasn't been great in the last few games. But you look at the fixture from a single game point of view against Leicester, should be a pretty good fixture for them. But then there will be managers, I guess, even though the numbers right now are 95%, you did mention it'll probably fall, and I'm expecting it to kind of fall as well, because of people might favor the doubles over the single game week. But in this case, maybe a single game fixture is also not too bad. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say most teams this week are probably, based on the fixtures, I think most teams will have triple Man United, triple Man City, and triple Brighton, which probably only leaves 2 spots, maybe 3 if you can't quite get to the 3-3-3. And looking at the way Salah played last week and Trent, I think those 2 are probably going to be in most teams. So then it's, well, do you have room for a Trippier or a Wilson or someone else? And that's where I think, looking at especially in that little top 10 most owned players template there, I think someone like Botman this week could drop to, as low as 5%, because I can just see him being stuck on the bench of most players because there's so many other great options. And these players here are the safe options. So we haven't even talked about all those punts, all those sexy players, who can score 10 or more points, and I'm sort of looking at the Manchester City boys. But yeah, so it's going to be a very interesting week where I think we might see some swings, especially with the result that we just saw in the Champions League overnight.
Exactly. So obviously, City have just beaten Real Madrid. They through to the final. We saw Pep making a few changes. Subs came on. Alvarez came on, which could be another differential. Someone we will talk about maybe in the chasing part of the mini league section. But from a defending point of view, I've got a mini league over here. This is the Football Chatbox mini league. So let's say, for example, you got a gap of, I guess, 18 points, which is probably still catchable in between number 1 and 2. You got also 3-point gap between second and third. So if you're in a position like this, like let's say you're currently ranked in, if you were in this example in the number 1 spot, what would you be looking out for from a mini league perspective?
If you're looking to defend your rank in a mini league, especially looking at this one, there's a buffer of 18 points.
Yep.
Well, I guess the two different strategies are, one, you can look at the players that your closest rival has and just essentially look to purchase those players, and that will essentially knock out any gain or any risk of any sort of gain from whoever's in second or third. The other option, which is what I'll be doing because I'm more focusing on my overall rank, is to choose players from that top 10 template that we just had a look at. Yeah. So, look, I don't think Kepa or Raya will be the highest owned goalkeepers in the top 20 or even 30,000 this week. I've seen a lot of people on social media looking to go to either the Man United goalkeeper or the Manchester City one. So, even though we can see they're 56 and 45% respectively, I've seen a lot of trades this week on social media of especially Kepa, because I don't think anybody wants to go near Chelsea at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm one of those Kepa / Rare owners, and I'm currently thinking, do I start Kepa or do I start Rare or do I take a hit for a goalkeeper, which is something else that I'm wondering about. I'm currently leaning on maybe keeping my current keepers. I probably might roll with Kepa, see what happens. Mendy didn't really have the best of games, but I don't really see Mendy probably getting dropped after one game immediately as well. So
yeah,
it is,
I think
go ahead.
Sorry, Ryan.
It is a risk, that's why. But yeah, go ahead.
Lampard and Kepa didn't have a great relationship during Lampard's first time at the club, so I don't think he will get back in these last 3 games. Look, Raya's got a tricky fixture in Spurs, but I think with Raya, you're always going to get save points. So, even if you can score a 3 or a 4-pointer, it would just mean that if someone was to take a hit for someone to play in goals, you would need to score 7 or 8 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Edison, I'm not sure if he'll play twice now that I guess the league's practically sewn up and they probably want to give some game time to their second and third goalkeepers. So, other than maybe a De Gea, who I think's nailed to play twice out of the teams playing twice. Look, Steele's the other one, but most people have already got 3 from Brighton.
Yep. Yeah, fair enough. And I assume that people who have triple up Brighton, they're probably on double defense with 1 mid or double mid with 1 defender. And yeah, I think you'll see this top 10k maybe switch to maybe a De Gea / Steele as a possible situation. Now, again, Brighton, their double includes of Southampton and Manchester City. Maybe Steele keeps 1 clean sheet against Southampton. Second one against City, probably not. De Gea, on the other hand, 1 game is away to Bournemouth. Bournemouth could possibly score against United, and then it's the home game against Chelsea. Now, you might see 1 clean sheet as well, probably there somewhere around that one of those 2 games. So that's basically, let's say if you count in points, it's like 6 points maybe minimum, plus another 2 points from another game. So you're looking about 8 points. Now, if Raya can get at least, like you mentioned, 4 points with like save points included, take a hit as well, you're basically equaling whoever you bring in. So I guess the upside isn't as much, like it's not there as much for a goalkeeper. But from the case of like an outfield player and a defender, maybe even an attacker, that's probably different. Yes.
Yeah, and like you're actually spot on, I think, with the way that you're thinking. As far as there's not too much upside when it comes to putting someone in between the sticks. It's more probably where the upside is as we know, especially in the second half of this year, is the mids and the forwards. Trent and Estupinan in the week that we're currently in have had super game weeks. But what we've seen is since the restart, it's been very hard for a team to keep a clean sheet at the moment. So there's probably a lot more upside in the mids and the forwards. So yeah, I think for a hit, if you're looking to trade out a goalkeeper, especially with only the 2 weeks to go. So usually when we are looking to take a hit, my own personal strategy with that is, looking at players that are either playing twice in that game week or looking at a player that I can hold for the next 7 or 8 weeks. But the fact we've only got this week and then the following week left, taking a hit for a goalkeeper in regards to upside, probably not there. I should say last year I was in a position where I was also wanting to chase rank, and in that famous week where Kevin De Bruyne scored 30 points, I actually did move for him for a hit, and I did make him captain. But that's, I guess, one of those examples of probably what we're trying to find today. Very, very hard to find. And I can say as well, Ryan, for every one of those moves that's worked, 5 or 6 probably don't. So we'll see if we can find that somewhere today.
Yep, fair enough. So, okay, back again to kind of like the defending. You mentioned probably the best case to hold a mini league lead is probably looking at seeing who else your opponents are bringing in and then probably blocking them from getting in. And I guess live FPL does help quite a bit in terms of being able to compare between two players. Now, there, if you look at the top two in here, there is a decent number of differential type players, which allows for that variance to kick in and leads to kind of being like lost probably, or like gives a bit of opportunity for gain from, let's say, the person in second as well. Now this could be applied even to overall rank. You could look at world number 1, world number 2, very similar situation. Could be if there's enough difference between the squads, then it helps. Now there could be situations where there isn't much difference, and that's where, from let's say a chasing point of view, you kind of have to be slightly different. So for example, from a chasing point of view, let me try and bring up another one because I think I got decent link that I can show you. Give me a second. So I think I have this one. Now, for example, I've got this, which is one of my pod mates on the channel, and I think the difference between his and mine. Now I'm chasing him, and there's only 3 player difference, which is not easy in terms of. So he's done a good job in trying to block quite a lot of my players. Now I've got to be kind of different. Now, if you look at the difference in his players, Steele, Trent, Shaw, those are all 3 who would probably be playing this week. But my difference is Rhea, Gabriel, and Gakpo. Now I can be slightly different. I can switch Gakpo out for someone else. I could switch Gabriel out as well. But what would you do in these kind of situations?
I think looking at that, he has blocked Shaw and Trent.
Yeah.
So, they would be 2 that would be worth owning this week. But with only the 2 weeks to go, and I could see there, there's a little bit of a gap there between yourself and Roy. I think Gakpo is probably the one that you'd be looking to move on.
Yeah.
And I think, looking at who's got the greatest upside, I think maybe the Manchester City guys, they obviously played twice. Very hard to predict Pep roulette, as we know, but I think looking at your situation, that if you are trying to chase Roy in this instance, I think that's probably the slot that you'd be looking. Do you have 1 free transfer or 2 this week?
1 free transfer.
Okay, so look, I'd probably be looking at Cody Gakpo. The second reason is it's Firmino's last game at Anfield this week. Now, he's not 100% fit, but you've got to think that Liverpool are going to give him some sort of minutes. and that's probably going to be at the expense of
Okay,
Cody
yep,
Gakpo.
yep, yep.
So I think he's the one, and he's also priced, at a point where you can move sideways to
Yep.
most of the Manchester City players
Yeah.
as well. So, were there any players specifically that you were having a think about
So
for that slot?
I've had a look at a couple of my like mini league rivals. There are a few others also. Like there's a gap between me. So I'm chasing one specific league which is not popping up for some reason. But there is like two others above me, and I've had a look at their squads, and because both of them like own Trent, they don't have enough money in the bank to go to, let's say, for example, someone like a Bruno Fernandes, who we know will play the full 19 probably both games. Now I can go to that, and I'm probably looking to do that, which could be a very differential move. And we know Bruno in the double game weeks tends to do well at times. So that is, I guess, that's where you're kind of differentiating. They have Trent, and it does come with great benefits, but then you can, because of that, their risks, the money they have in the bank is not as high because of you got to have Trent, you have Salah, you have Haaland. You're tied up in terms of players you could probably go to. Now I can move to Bruno Fernandes and kind of be differential over there. That's what I'm thinking.
I think so. Now that I know that you have that extra slot for a Man United midfielder, what you get with Bruno, you get his minutes are nailed. You know he's going to play every minute of every single game. He's actually created 10 big chances in the last 6 weeks. So I think with the footage we saw overnight of Marcus Rashford back in training, that only helps Bruno, because
Yep.
now he's actually got someone he can pass the ball to who can finish, as opposed to some of the strikers at the moment that have been playing. So,
Yep.
look, I think the fact that your rival doesn't have Bruno, he's probably the one. He's also the player that I'm actually fearing in my own league, because I don't have Bruno, but the person who's actually second in my league,
Yep.
they actually do have Bruno.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I think a good example would be the Australian Twitter League. So you're currently third in this one, right? Let's kind of reverse the situations now. The gap between 1 and 3, it's like 4 points. So in this kind of situation, for example, let's say if I was to compare the first one with you, there is a decent difference in players here. Now you could kind of also take into the account where they got Steele, you got De Gea, they've got Burn and Wilson as well. So I guess they're probably not looking to play Dan Burn this week. That could probably change. Who comes off for that is a different story. But you got Trent and Shaw, where they don't have that. So now you kind of have the upside on that. Now one thing they could do is probably bring in maybe a Shaw to block your Shaw. That's a possibility. But the chances of bringing Trent is not high because he's a single game week fixture most likely. So you do have opportunities there to also make differences, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, having a look at this, I think, he's, as you said, I don't think Burn will start. He'll start Steele against my De Gea. I think maybe both teams will keep one clean sheet there, so that should probably cancel itself out. Luke Shaw's move now to left back. He should have had an assist on the weekend. There was a huge chance created by Luke Shaw down that left wing. So, looking at the team side by side, I'm pretty sort of bullish on, hopefully being able to catch the current number one ranked on the Australian Twitter League. Solanke, Bournemouth are an interesting one. Bournemouth essentially don't have anything to play for now. They're one of those teams, as we say, that are on the beach, but it's their last home game. And I am always fearful of a player that plays for a team during their last home game, because we know that they're always trying to finish the season off well. So I don't buy into they've got nothing to play for when it's their last home game of the season, because, all the fans are there, all the fans are up and about. So, but yeah, having a look at this, I'll still probably be looking to bring in McAllister. He's playing twice. He's got a very good fixture in Southampton. I guess probably won't know that 100% until after the game that's tonight here
Yeah.
in Australia, just to make sure that there's no sort of injuries or things like that. But looking at this, I'm pretty sort of bullish to be able to catch this particular person. You know, to have 6 players that are different, which will probably be 5. Looking at, he's obviously got
Yeah.
the captain's armband on Wilson, and I don't have it on him this week. I've got it on his teammate Isak. But yeah, looking at this, I've probably got a couple more double game week players than he might have, which should hopefully hold
Yes.
me in pretty good stead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we'll see how it goes. Things could change. Now, you mentioned like last home game. A certain Harry Kane also comes to mind. Potentially, not only last home game, could be also last home game for Spurs as well. That is a potential situation. So you could see players doing really well as well. Now, obviously, single game week fixture, but again, single game week players can potentially outscore many double game week players as well. So I wouldn't put anyone off going for certain players like that. Now, there's a question from Mira, who is currently 5th in this league. So she's also chasing and looking to try and catch up. Now, if I was to take her team, so she is 13 points behind, which is not too far from number 1 spot. So can catch up in 2 game weeks, anything can happen. Let's, for example, if I was to compare Mira with number 1, again, there is a decent number of difference between the teams. Again, very similar to your team though, because if I was to bring your team up here, the gaps go small again in terms of the difference in players.
And it will probably be even smaller because it looks like the only 2 that we won't have the same is Bruno and probably Botman, because I'm, as I said, 99% bringing in McAllister. So, it's Bruno Fernandes. Even though I'm a huge Manchester United supporter, I think I'll be, looking to probably hide behind the sofa when we play, because I'll be very, very worried about Bruno this week.
Fair enough. I guess for Mira who's listening, that's a positive sign then. But when you compare now we saw the teams against number 1, so that kind of gives a bit more confidence. So it's not really while there are people above you that have maybe few differences in terms of place. Now we compared your Mira to, let's say, yours, but like if you were to compare, let's say, Mira's to the number 1 spot, there's quite a bit more difference similar to your position as well, and that's why you go, okay, there is room to maybe have a few gains here.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at the side by side graphic there, I think Steele and De Gea could produce some similar returns.
Yep.
Burn and Botman both won't start this week for either team.
Yep.
I think you'd rather have Trent over Saka at the moment, with everything that's gone on with obviously Arsenal's previous 6 or 7 games. They just haven't looked good, and I think Saka's only returned once in his last 6. So and Trent's back to just being Trent. Bruno's playing twice against Madison, that's playing once. McAllister twice against Solanke. And as I said before, Wilson wasn't spotted at training during the week. So potentially looking at these 2 teams side by side, I'd say you'd be pretty bullish if you were obviously Mira.
Yeah, fair enough. So positive news there for Mira, I guess. But so final, just to kind of wrap it up, going back to, let's say, for example, your team here. Let's say if you were in a position of chasing with your team, and let's say you had like a template team, what would you do?
Well, you would need to take some risks.
Yeah.
If you were in a position where you wanted to chase, for example, if say you were ranked 120,000 and your aim's to be in the top 100,000, I think you've got to chase rank. Just prior to that, with so many players now playing Fantasy Premier League, I think anything inside the top 250,000 should actually be celebrated. It's very, very hard at the moment to climb rank. There's a lot of these sorts of shows where a lot of people have the same similar teams, so it's very, very hard to climb rank. But I think if you are looking to chase, probably the areas that you could look at is, and you'd be brave, but do you switch the captain's armband off Haaland? Do you take the punt that Pep might only play him once? Now, I'm not a subscriber to this theory because I think he doesn't want to mess with form. I think he's going to want Manchester City to win every game leading into the FA Cup final, and then, as we know now, the final of the Champions League. So But if you are chasing rank and, and if you're not too fussed, if you're in that situation where you're 120,000 and you want to finish top 100, would it really matter to you if you blew out to 150, or would you rather take that risk to then get, towards the top 100,000 and so on? So I think where the areas that have got the biggest upside is a potential change of captain. I'd say a Manchester City midfielder, or the other Manchester City striker, Alvarez, who came on overnight in the 89th minute and scored. And, I'd be pretty confident that he'd start at least one of the two, and he should get minutes in the other game because, especially if City beat Chelsea, in that second game, there wouldn't be too much need to play, obviously, Haaland for the full 90. So for me, if you're chasing, they're probably the areas that I'd be looking at. But, there are some other players that you could also, have a look at. I know that everyone's either got Matoma or McAllister, but what about someone like a Gross from Brighton? I think, Gross actually does offer the chance to have a really big swing. At the start of the year, he was the player that we all wanted. For the first 7 or 8 rounds, everyone had him, not McAllister, Matoma. It was pretty much all about Gross. I think when you're talking the Manchester City midfielders, this is why it's a raffle. Gundogan, Mahrez, Foden, KDB. I think all of them
Bernardo
can
Silva scored
provide a
too.
return. So it's a really tricky one. I'd probably go Mahrez. He only played about 15 minutes overnight. He's actually got a return in his last 4 games. Now, he doesn't have the returns of someone like a Gundogan, but I just feel like he's ready to just pop now, and he's ready for that haul. So I'd probably be looking at Mahrez. If you're wanting to get ultra punty, Anthony from Manchester United, he's looked pretty good in the last 3 or 4 game weeks. Look, being a Man United supporter and watching Man United very closely, I've got to say that if the left-hand goalpost was about a metre wider, he'd have figures almost as good as Haaland. He seems to love just missing by about half a metre of the left-hand goalpost, and is a very selfish player, which isn't good for a Man United fan, but it's good for a fantasy manager who owns him. Very selfish. The other option is someone like a Martial, but you'd be pretty brave to do that, especially if Rashford's back.
Yeah.
So we obviously touched on Gross. Ferguson's probably the other one from Brighton who you could potentially look at. He's at a very cheap price point.
What about NCCU, maybe?
He's another one. I think he might have left the last game with a bit of a knock, with a little bit of a niggle. So, look, we'll probably see whether he starts overnight. And then if he does start tonight, then he should be okay for the weekend. The only thing is the sort of rest period as well. That I think it's only a 3-day break in between tonight's game and then their next game, Brighton. We talked about Saka and some of the other Arsenal midfielders. Kane's having a remarkable season. He's scored in 24 different games. And I think that if there was no Haaland, we'd all have Kane nailed every week. We wouldn't even think about selling him. But it's just the fact that we do have Haaland there to pick. So, he's always one to pick. Look, Kane's only blanked 1 in his last 10.
Yeah.
So, but I guess what's his ceiling? He normally scores between 6 and 9.
Yeah. Doesn't justify the price tag, but yeah.
Yeah. So, and, if you are wanting to chase, scoring a 7 or 8 pointer is probably not what you're after. You're probably after a 13, 14 point plus score. Look, probably the last one. This is really left field. Looking at the fixtures and looking at what's to play for, of the teams fighting to stay up, you've got Maddison, Barnes, McNeil, Gibbs-White, Danilo, and maybe Rodrigo. They're maybe worth a mention based on they're all fighting for survival. Now, I'm not going to suggest that we all go out and buy all of them, but if there was one, if you're looking for a bit of a punt, and maybe purely for the last round, if you're more favouring this week players that are playing twice, Dwight McNeil, playing for Everton, is playing against Wolves and Bournemouth. Now, both Wolves and Bournemouth, as we say, are currently on the beach. So would that be a fixture that, that would suit him? I'd say yes. He scored 21 points 2 weeks ago. Now, I'm not suggesting that he'll score that, 21 pointer again, but he's got a huge ceiling. So he's also one that if you're feeling ultra punty, if it's not for this week, he might be one for the last week.
Mm.
What about yourself, Ryan? Have you
I
been thinking about this as well?
So from a single gaming point of view, I haven't thought about 37 too much, but 38. Now, obviously, if you were to look at what do they have to play for, probably nothing really at the moment. But the form is really good in terms of Crystal Palace. And again, maybe Roy Hodgson just wants to like go off with a bang and wants to like just let the lads. I think Jose Mourinho said this. He let the horses run. Eze could be a decent punt. I mean, they're playing Forest on the final day. Now, this would depend on if, let's say, Forest are safe by that time. If Forest are safe by that time, I think it should be a good fixture for Crystal Palace because Forest won't really have any incentive to play really hard, I would say. So I'm kind of flipping the situation in terms of maybe Forest in that point are on the beach. They're like, okay, we're safe. We don't have to worry about this fixture too much. Crystal Palace are the home team, so they would want to entertain their fans. I mean, you could spin up all these kind of narratives, but it's not a bad shout, I guess.
Yeah, I think some of their midfielders at Palace are in super form, and I guess in that last round, I think whether you're in the top 1,000 or if you're ranked 1.5 million, I think we all probably want to have that one last punt of the season.
Yep.
So there might be one spot for all of us to find a player that we wouldn't normally pick, but as we know, it is only for one game. So yeah, look, that's a really good shout there, Ryan.
All right, cool. Let's just wrap it up. I've got a few questions. I've got one from Ryan X, so my namesake. It says, I'm 15 points behind first and I have a free hit left. What would be a good free hit to catch up in game week 37? You recommend thinking of captaining Bruno instead of Haaland. Now, I think if you have a free hit, this is at me personally, I think that itself is a differential already. And then in that specific situation, I don't think you need to worry about switching captaincy too much, especially if the points gap is only 15 points. If it was something larger, maybe then yes, you could probably consider it. But what do you think?
Yeah, geez, it would be nice to still have that chip handy. Look, yeah, spot on. I think that if you have your free hit chip, that is enough to say you don't have to go risky with your skipper. Essentially, it's what we said before. You can pick your favoured three players from Man United, Man City, and then Brighton. And then the other two gaps, look, you'd probably go Trent and Salah, really. I don't think there's anyone from Chelsea that you'd want to probably double up on. Yes, Sterling scored twice last week, but Chelsea they just don't really offer too much at the moment. And they've got two very hard fixtures in Man City and Manchester United. So, yeah, look, you're probably looking at a triple up from those three. Where you might get a little bit fancy is maybe having a look at the players that your rival has and, looking at, say your rival's got a steal. Well, then you might go somebody else from Brighton. You might go the triple up with two in the midfield and one at the back, or you might go someone like a Ferguson up front with a McAllister and a Stupinan, for example. But I think if you're on free hit this week, you're probably looking to go 3 from Brighton, 3 from United, 3 from City, and then Salah and Trent.
Yeah.
And then it would all come down to who does your rival have, and you might look to have 4 or 5 players different, which means, they've only got to outscore the other players by 3 or so points each.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would probably follow the very similar. The personnel in those three could slightly alter based on who your rivals have as well. And then the final one for Mira is, what are you guys doing about Rashford? Reckon he plays both and keep, or enough to move on with the risk of playing just one?
So here in Melbourne, Australia, Saturday morning, my normal routine is wake up and get all the information, listen to as much Fantasy Premier League podcasts about all of the press conferences. So that'll be the first one that I go to is the Manchester United press conference. If he's past fit, he'll be straight in. And I actually saw on Twitter last night, a lot of people are going to slap the captain's armband on him as a really punty, chasey move. But yeah, look, if he's past fit, and he was seen last night training, he'll be in my starting 11. If he's a 50-50, I think I may start one of the Newcastle forwards over him. Then obviously, if he is ruled out, I'll just play both of my Newcastle forwards. But, someone like a Rashford, in the form that he's been in this year, really, really good fixtures. If he's, even if he's about 80%, I think he's a must-have for this week,
Yeah.
especially considering how many other players around you will probably own him. So it's someone who's in my position. I think I have no choice but to start him.
Mm.
If you were looking to chase, then okay, is there a Manchester City player that I might be able to bring in? But that's only if he's past not fit.
Yeah.
And it also obviously depends on the rest of your team and whether you've got any other fires that you might need to
True.
put out.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Ryan?
So for me personally, I would keep him. We've seen like photos of him in training as well. If Ten Hag does come and say he's not fit, not going to be able to play both games, then yes, sell. If not, otherwise I play him, even if it's just one game, because I've also got in my team Martinelli, which is a fire that I have to put out. And there was an article by David Ornstein saying that Martinelli could be out for the remaining 2 games of the season. That is kind of a position that I need to look at and I need to address compared to maybe a Rashford who potentially could still play 2 games even if he's 80% fit. United still need to win these 2 games to secure top 4, so it's very important for them to try and get. But yeah, if he's fit, I play him. If he's not fit, there is potentially the case to maybe, again, like you mentioned, start one of the Newcastle forwards. Because let's say you wanted to switch Rashford to a City midfielder. You can't be certain that the City midfielder will play 2 games. So you might as well keep your Rashford, maybe even for the final game against Fulham at home, if needed. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty with that Manchester City team, isn't there? And it's a shame because, as we know, Manchester City are clearly the best team in the comp, but there's only really one that's probably nailed at the moment. And it's very frustrating that, I think at the start of the year, we all probably moved to Foden at about round maybe 10 or so, and then he got benched, and then we all had him sitting on our benches, or we all had him scoring 1 point for a few weeks. I'm very excited about the Newcastle fixture versus Leicester. Leicester are fighting to stay up. Newcastle playing at home, fighting for a top 4 spot. I can see goals in that game. I really can see that being a 3-2 or a 3-1 or even a 4 or 5. I think, even if Newcastle are winning 2-0, Leicester have no choice but to try to win that game.
Yep.
So that could be an absolute blowout. So I don't think starting Wilson or Isak this week will actually hurt too much, especially, as you said, if the Manchester City players are only going to play 100 minutes or so, you're not really losing out too much there.
Here's a question from me. If both Isak and Wilson were fit, start both or bench one?
I'm going to say, depending on the rest of your team,
yeah.
But let's say that for myself, if Rashford's not fit, I'll likely start them both.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But if I had to pick one, it would probably come down to their minutes played tonight. Wilson scored the 2 goals last week, both from the spot.
Yeah.
But the second penalty, he was actually in the process of being subbed off.
Yeah.
Now, who would have taken the second penalty if he got subbed off? Alexander Isak. And then the whole narrative this week changes all over the social media. Everyone would actually be talking about Alexander Isak. So they're the margins. But as I said, like I can see Newcastle putting at least 2 or 3 past Leicester. So I'm very, very bullish on them this week.
Yep, fair enough. And then finally, any City defenders you would consider? This is from Mira.
Oh, geez. I think we've all been a victim of Pep Roulette.
Yes.
Nathan Aki was one that I brought in, and then that just didn't work out, which was the same as a lot of people. I'm going to say it's just very tricky, the Manchester City defence. We only do have the 3 games remaining. Will they start both games in the actual double? Probably not. They'll probably see a whole lot of rotation. The one that's nailed, well, there's none that are nailed, but the one with the highest minutes, I think, will be Diaz. But he is quite expensive for a defender who's probably got a ceiling of six to 7 points.
Yeah.
But if I was picking one for Manchester City, it would probably be him.
Yeah, same.
What about yourself?
I think it's Diaz, but the upside I feel like is not there. I also saw someone do a Twitter thread, one of the Man City, those who make like the predicted teams, and they went and compared City in a similar situation before, where they had a couple games left, and the title was won in let's say for example, if the title could be won against the Chelsea game. So what happened was Pep played his strong team. In this case, it's probably similar to the Chelsea game, where he'll play a strong team. The second game will be a more rotated team, one that you give players who haven't got much minutes this season, they'll get minutes. The third game, which is in game week 38, will be another strong team, so that with a few adjustments so you get most of your core still in match rhythm ahead of the cup final, and then after that again ahead of the UCL final. So that's what I'm kind of expecting as well. I think the second game of the City one against Brighton could see rotation, especially if the league is won even before City go to Chelsea as well. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, spot on. I mean, City have, as we said before, City have still got 2 cup finals to play, and I think Pep will want to keep them in the super form that they're in. I think in regards to this week's fixtures, I think that they do go to Chelsea and try to win the league as soon as possible. So you'd expect them to go pretty much full strength. The second game, if they've already won the title, I think sports science will probably dictate who they start and who they don't. If there are any players that are showing any sign of a fatigue or a niggle or a knock, they're the ones that will probably get a rest. But as you said, I think in the last week of the season, City are going to go for it again, just so they can essentially say 3 more games, guys. Let's win in the last round against Brentford, FA Cup final, which they hopefully lose to Manchester United, and then the Champions League final, which I hope they lose that as well, being a United supporter.
Forza Inter. Anyways, yeah. So that's basically it. So thank you to Anthony as well, and I hope this kind of helped for everyone listening in terms of maybe looking at different players that you can try and target to try and get in for your teams. So we will be recording a pod for Scout the Game Week as well, discussing the fixtures for anyone who wants to listen to that. That'll be on Spotify later. But make sure to follow Anthony on Twitter. Anthony, you have anything else to plug?
Yeah, just obviously my Twitter handle is FPL Dimmer, DIMMER, all the one word. I'm normally on there a fair few times a day, and if anyone's got any questions or anyone wants to interact, I make a point of it to make sure that I respond to everybody. But Ryan, thank you so much for having me on today. I had an absolute ball, and hopefully the fact that you're chasing rank, hopefully you can find that diamond in the rough this week.
Hopefully we will see. But yeah, thank you all for watching, everyone. If you're new, make sure you hit the like button, hit that subscribe button as well, and I'll see you all for the deadline stream this weekend. Until then, peace out, everyone.